Tonight on NewsWatch, Egyptian Christians weigh in on the country's constitution, what it could mean for Coptics going forward. Plus, identity theft on the rise, why your tax return might just be the next target for criminals. And life in prison after stealing a chocolate chip cookie? CBN News takes a look at the 3 strikes law. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin. Have Egyptians dealt a final blow to the political dominance of the Muslim Brotherhood? That's what many are hoping for after this week's constitution vote in Egypt, especially Christians who have been facing great persecution there. Heather Sells has more in tonight's top story.
Many Egyptians are hoping that this latest vote will propel the country into a new era and new direction. And so many, including this Coptic priest, have urged the people to vote. But the Muslim Brotherhood called for a boycott of the vote as the new constitution emphasizes secularism. It essentially strips all the constitutional changes written in by the Brotherhood and voted on in 2012. This woman, a former mayor, says the new constitution will give power back to the people.
I want my ability as an Egyptian to choose. I can choose the army or the police or a civilian. This is my choice. The world always talks about democracy. Let me choose my democracy.
The new constitution bans political parties based on religion. It limits the role of Islamic law in legislation, and it gives women equal rights. Many believe turnout for this week's vote will far surpass the vote in 2012.
In 2012, we tried going to vote on the Constitution, but we were prevented by the Muslim Brotherhood. They closed the road and stopped us.
The hope this time that this vote will restore stability in Egypt and support the current government as it battles opposition from former President Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood supporters. But there are concerns. Security forces have arrested those calling for a no vote, raising questions about the legitimacy of this referendum. Heather Sells, CBN News.
And senior international correspondent Gary Lane joins us now with more. Welcome, Gary.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, it seems like the new constitution is going to overwhelmingly pass. What does that mean for Egyptian Christians?
It's a good day for Christians because this constitution, while it is not perfect, is much better than the one they had before. This one guarantees their places of worship and their right to worship, live under Christian, Judeo-Christian law, and have that apply in their personal lives. Also to build churches. So it's very good for Christians. We'll have to see how it plays out, though.
Voter turnout seemed to be up. Would you say that means most Egyptians are wanting real change and to actually back away from Islamic law?
That's a big part of it. I think for the Christians, the turnout was higher because their votes were not suppressed like they have been in the past. There were some reports in places like Minya, some villages, Christian villages, where the votes were suppressed, where Muslim Brotherhood members were preventing them from going to the polls. But overall, many more Christians were able to participate this time around. And people in general, I think it was showing that they support the military's action against the Muslim Brotherhood, cracking down on them, calling them a terrorist organization, and overthrowing, of course, Morsi. So it was an endorsement of the government's action.
Gary, some are questioning the legitimacy of the vote. Explain why.
Well, they're questioning that because before the vote, the military didn't really allow any posters to go up saying vote no. They allowed very few campaigns in opposition to the Constitution. So people were saying that this wasn't really fair. But there's no evidence that they actually suppressed vote or stuffed ballot boxes. Those are things that happened under Mubarak, of course, in 2005, and again in 2010, also 2012 under the Brotherhood.
Looking forward, how do you see Egypt changing?
Well, for the better, because this Constitution, while not perfect, is much better than what they've had in the past. Secularist, more guarantees for minorities, religious minorities, and so forth. But we'll have to wait and see how it plays out, because if the military is strengthened and they come to power, and some think that Sisi will become the next president, or could become the next president, if he rules with an iron fist and doesn't deliver, especially in the area of the economy, people will be out in the streets once again.
All right, Gary, thank you for your insights. Sure. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge. And for more of Gary's insights, make sure you check out his blog. It's called The Global Lane. You can find it at our website, cbnnews.com. Did the Obama administration risk the security of Americans with the rollout of the healthcare website? That's what some lawmakers wanted answered today during a Capitol Hill hearing. One of the administration's top cybersecurity officers said he was concerned about potential vulnerabilities in the site before the launch. And others argued healthcare.gov is still riddled with problems, some of which may compromise the confidentiality of users' sensitive health or personal information.
It could be used potentially to gain information of financial data. It could be used for identity theft. It could be misused many different ways. This can be long-term, can be very damaging to an individual.
However, Medicare's top cybersecurity official says the site recently passed full security tests and that to date there have been no successful security attacks. Identity theft is getting worse, and the recent breach at Target could be just the beginning of a new surge. That's because thieves are not just targeting your credit cards. Experts warn your tax refund may not be safe either. Dale Hurd has the story.
Your identity in the hands of criminals. It's a nightmare for millions of Americans. The number of Target customers whose personal information was stolen over the holidays is nearly 3 times larger than first reported. As many as 110 million people. Names, addresses, phone numbers, and email.
If your information has been breached, you need to know about it.
They gave out all the dates that they were concerned with, and out of all those dates, I've been here 6 times using my card.
Even if you've been tracking your credit card since the massive data breach, you may still not be in the clear, because it could be weeks or months before criminals use your information.
Many times, there may not be any suspicious activity yet, because the attackers might sit on this information for some time. They might sell that data to other people that might take action on it.
Identity theft is already the #1 complaint to the Federal Trade Commission, and with tax season ramping up, that's expected to continue. Tax-related identity theft is becoming big business for cyber criminals. If the hacker is successful, your tax return will be kicked out of the system and the refund will be denied, because the IRS computers will show that someone was already paid. Experts say that if you file by mail, do it at a post office, not from an unlocked mailbox in front of your home. If you file electronically, use a secure computer on a secure network. If your return is hacked, you will get your money eventually, but it could be delayed for up to 6 months. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
President Obama is pushing for more access to higher education for low-income students. The president and first lady met today with leaders from more than 100 colleges and universities, all of which have agreed to take action to help disadvantaged students. They'll do so by engaging low-income students as early as elementary school, encourage them to pursue higher education, and by boosting college advising and entrance exam preparation, among other strategies. This new push comes as the cost of college grows increasingly higher. Tuition prices at some schools have gone up as much as 40% in recent years. But as Ephraim Graham reports, some students are still figuring out ways to get a degree without going into debt.
It was very stressful to start.
Christopher Wells is a man on a mission. Earn a degree debt-free.
My first year, my mother had to take money out of the 401k plan. We had a deal, and she said that she would pay the first year at school, but every year after that, I would have to pay for it myself or figure out a way to pay it.
How does he do it? The 20-year-old works summers instead of chilling out. Wells spends 40 hours a week as an intern and waits tables on the weekends. He also lives at home and commutes to class.
I had the opportunity to live on campus, but I could have taken out a loan, but I just chose not to. And that was one of the biggest decisions for me.
And while it hasn't been easy, this honors student is on track to graduate with no student loan debt. Many of his classmates won't be able to enjoy the same freedom.
Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. They just, they're on campus, their parents pay for their tuition, and they're kind of just going with the motion. And that's just not me.
Figures show student debt in America has climbed to $1 trillion. The average balance, about $23,000. However, some college graduates are looking at more than $100,000 in the red. That debt is even tougher to pay back in today's economy, where most college graduates can't find a job.
So many times I meet people who've got $100,000 spent to get a PhD in, German polka history or something. Oh my gosh, where are they going to get this money back?
Financial expert Dave Ramsey says students must change their thinking when it comes to college.
We've got to break the mindset that in order to be a student, you have to have a student loan. Instead, let's go back to the old-fashioned way of paying for it. And you actually can do that. It's difficult, but you can do it. It's called work.
That work actually begins years before even applying for college. Step 1, choose a school you can actually afford, perhaps a community college to get started. Then, look for free money in the form of grants and scholarships.
You've got to apply for scholarships. There's lots of them out there. You've got to take classes on how to take your SAT and ACT so that your scores come up, which qualifies you for more scholarships. And then you get grants. I grant you the right to work while you're in school. WORK has not killed anybody.
And when they make it to campus, watch out for those lifestyle extras like pizzas and parties.
An interesting thing I was reading in state schools the other day is the average college student graduating this last year had $27,900 in student loan debt. And the interesting thing is that's about what they spent over 4 years to live off campus in an apartment, to eat out, to attend social functions associated with college. And so really those dollars that drove them into debt were not education dollars, they were lifestyle dollars.
A lesson Christopher Wells has already mastered.
My mother always said to me, if you ain't got it, don't get it. So if I don't have it, I'm not going to get it. If I don't have the cash for it, then I'm not going to buy it.
Wells doesn't carry a credit card or even a car loan. He still drives his 2001 Chevy his parents gave him back in high school.
Life is not all about partying or going out with your friends and stuff. Like, if you want to be successful in life, you have to work, you got to save your money, you have to budget. It's very essential.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Coming up, why many Americans are celebrating religious freedom in the face of growing hostility. Welcome back. Today is National Religious Freedom Day in America. The day marks the passage of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. It was written by Thomas Jefferson and enacted in 1786. It's the basis for the religious freedom guarantee in the First Amendment of the Constitution. The statute reads in part, "No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever, and that all men shall be free to profess and by argument to maintain their opinion in matters of religion." The Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty works to protect religious freedom. Emily Hardman is with the group, and she joins us now from Washington with more. Emily, do you think we've seen a rise in attacks on religious freedom in America?
Absolutely. There's an alarming trend that we're seeing, that people are trying to push religion back into churches and to say, it's okay, you can have your religious freedom, just keep it inside your church. And then as soon as people come out into the public, it's like people are having an allergic reaction to it. But just as you read, that's not what the founders meant when they enshrined the free exercise of religion in our Constitution. In fact, they said it was core to our absolute human dignity. And that is why they called it the most sacred of fundamental rights.
Yes, most definitely. Well, one of the biggest religious liberty cases the country is seeing is the fight over the contraception mandate in the Affordable Care Act. The Beckett Fund is representing various groups suing the mandate, suing against it. Talk about that.
There are 91 cases against this unconstitutional mandate. This represents over 300 plaintiffs and thousands of individuals who are opposing this mandate. Let me tell you about one case that the Beckett Fund represents. We represent the Little Sisters of the Poor. This is a religious order of nuns who have taken a vow of poverty and a vow of obedience to care for the neediest elderly in society and to treat them as if they were Christ. But now the government is forcing the Little Sisters to either participate in their contraception delivery scheme or pay millions of dollars in fines if they don't obey. This is absurd. The Little Sisters will be fined $2 million if they don't participate. Their Denver home would have to pay this $2 million. Their total budget is $6 million. This is being taken from the neediest in society and given to the IRS. This is absurd. The good news is 90% of these cases are winning in court, and the Little Sisters got relief from the Supreme Court, and we hope that stays. Another absurd point about this mandate is 96% of businesses and corporations have been exempt for commercial or political reasons. Yet the administration refuses to exempt the Little Sisters for religious reasons.
All right, Emily Hardman, a religious liberty expert with the Beckett Fund. Thanks for your time. A lot of it does not make sense, the policies that are being made. Thanks again for talking with us today.
Thanks, Mark.
Up next, 3 strikes and you're locked up. Learn about a law that's costing taxpayers big. Imagine getting sentenced to life in prison for stealing a slice of pizza. Believe it or not, it can happen under the so-called 3 strikes laws. Now, these laws were supposed to get violent criminals off the streets. Instead, they end up locking up thousands of non-violent offenders at a great cost to taxpayers. Jennifer Wishon brings us tonight's Focus Report.
The U.S. puts more people behind bars than any other country. More than 10% of those in American prisons face life sentences. Some call life the new death sentence, where in some cases, golf club thieves get the same punishment as armed bank robbers. Much of this is due to laws made popular in the 90s.
And those who commit repeated violent crimes should be told, when you commit a third violent crime, you will be put away and put away for good. 3 strikes and you are out.
The murders of 2 young girls by criminals with long rap sheets led to this 3 strikes movement. Dozens of states and the federal government rushed laws on the books that trigger an automatic life sentence on a 3rd felony conviction. The laws were designed to keep violent repeat offenders off the streets, but in many cases, a person can get locked up for life for committing a non-violent, even laughable crime. For instance, in California, there are people in prison on their 3rd strike for stealing a pair of socks, taking change from a parked car, shoplifting a pair of work gloves, and even stealing a chocolate chip cookie from a restaurant.
3 strikes laws don't work.
Mark Marr has studied sentencing policies and the criminal justice system for 30 years. He says 3 strikes laws have succeeded in locking up thousands without any substantial drop in the crime rate.
Yeah, the problem with these laws is that it's a one-size-fits-all policy, and the reason we have judges is to determine individual circumstances. No 2 crimes, no 2 offenders are exactly alike.
And judges find their hands tied under 3 strikes laws. They have no freedom to consider the circumstances of the crime or the defendant. In the case of Rayvell Finch, a 22-year-old sentenced to life for heroin possession under Louisiana's 3 strikes law, the judge called the sentence clearly excessive and designed to cause needless suffering. According to the Sentencing Project, more than 10,000 people serving life have been convicted of a nonviolent crime. However, even when parole is an option, criminologist Fran Buntman says there's a hesitation.
I think it's the fear that there will be the unlucky politician who supports a policy and the person who gets out of prison or doesn't go into prison because of that policy lands up murdering somebody.
So many politicians want to be tough on crime.
Yes, though I think we are starting to see a shift on that. What we need in our sentencing policy is far more sophisticated, fine-tuned approaches that emphasize empirical evidence, that emphasize our better values in terms of we'd rather invest in schools than prisons.
Public support is building for reforming the way criminals are sentenced. It's also uniting some unlikely allies in Washington. Liberal Senators Patrick Leahy and Dick Durbin are teaming up with conservative Senators Rand Paul and Mike Lee to sponsor a bill that would do away with mandatory federal sentences for nonviolent offenders.
What is it costing taxpayers to put all of these people away for life?
Conservatively speaking, it costs about $25,000 a year to keep someone in prison. When people become older, 50 or so, it can be 3 times that much.
That's $60,000 to $70,000 a year for elderly prisoners who likely pose no threat to society.
If there's one thing we know in criminology, it's that people do tend to age out of crime.
Crime rates go down drastically as people mature into their 30s and 40s, which is why Maher argues holding people for life, in many cases, is a bad public investment.
1 in 9 people in prison are serving a life sentence. That is staggering. Is this a moral issue?
I think so.
And Dr. Buntman credits Christians for bringing questions of morality to the debate over sentencing.
Committing crime is not moral, but neither is over-punishing moral. And we have to find the right balance between the morality of punishment and the immorality of over-punishment.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Up next, making dreams come true. Find out why these 2 ladies are all smiles. You're never too old to try something new, and that's what 2 Texas women just learned. At 63 and 93 years old, Anna Heath and Ann Doran lived their whole lives with their feet on the ground. Well, that changed recently when the elderly ladies took their first flight. Ann and Anna live at Grace Care Center. The nursing home has a program called Grace-Filled Dreams.
I never thought at my age I'd do something like this. This is just something to make it a little special for them.
The Grace-Filled Dreams program works to fulfill lifelong dreams of residents of the nursing home. Boy, that's wonderful and great to see their smiles. That's all for this edition of NewsWatch. Remember, you can email us your comments and questions at newswatch@cbn.com. Hope you'll join us next time. Have a good night.